Nope, all good.
Cool. Great. Well, happy Monday. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start the presentation. Can you see that okay? Good. All right. So we're going to talk about both the MCAT and the dental school entrance exams today. So since our two participants are both taking the MCAT, we'll go quickly through the DAT information, but we will make sure you have the resources you need for those of you that are watching the recording and going to take the dental admissions test. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about today, but certainly I know everyone's at a different stage in the planning and studying process. So um, some of this may be some things that you've already done or thought about, some you may be thinking about now. So feel free to ask questions as we go, so we can kind of tailor to what you're looking for. Okay. So I think a lot of people hear the word MCAT and DAT, and this is how you feel, right? Like just the idea, the undertaking of these really intense, long exams is a lot to think about. So, first of all, let's take a big deep breath together. I love the purple elephant. I think he's great. And not only taking a deep breath now, but I'm hoping that through having this conversation and breaking the MCAT and DAT into like little small pieces, it will feel like something that you're able to accomplish. I also always tell folks that I'm talking to about like their test prep that this is a short-term undertaking. It is a lot. It is meant to be a lot, but hopefully this will be a year out of your life, and then you'll move forward and go on to be doctors and not have to think about it again. Um, okay. So again, the two folks here today are focusing on taking the MCAT. As a quick overview, there is an entrance exam for those that are going to dental school, and it's a different entrance exam. So if you are someone that's interested in dental school, you have to take the dental admissions test. And this is just kind of an overview of that test. It's shorter than the MCAT in time. It's closer to 5 hours. The MCAT is closer to 8 hours. But it still is a pretty intense test that you have to put a lot of effort into studying and preparing for. And so the ada.org is the best place to start for any resources you need about the DAT. You'll notice throughout this presentation that I have QR codes. That's intentional so that you can go to all these resources right now or whenever, bookmark them, and kind of keep track of the things that will be useful to you. So the cost of the DAT is about $525. They do have some fee assistance available through the ADA, but you have to kind of go to the website and apply for that. Um, a difference between the DAT and the MCAT is that you can they don't have the opening day where everyone kind of registers at once. You can register anytime at their testing sites and they have them year round. And this is a little bit more information for those that are interested in the DAT and kind of first steps in the process. Um, for both of these tests, and I know our applicants today are already registered, but the first big steps are really like signing up for the platforms that they need to, like the AAMC or the ADA, and making sure that you have all your login information and are ready to go. And so I won't spend too much time talking about the DAT, but for those of you that do have additional questions about the DAT itself, there's a 2024 candidate guide, and these are some screenshots from that guide on the content. And this guide is really your go-to tool for everything DAT related as you prepare to take that exam. And that QR code on this page will take you there. These are some frequently asked questions from the DAT. So asking about like fees associated. Obviously, these are expensive tests, so it's always nice to know if there are programs in place to support folks that have a little bit more trouble paying the high costs of the tests. Um, Common questions also are around how many times to take the test, how many times you can take the test, and so forth. So again, for those interested in taking the DAT, let me know if you have any additional questions. And so we'll go ahead and really focus this presentation on the MCAT for our folks that are joining us today. So what is the MCAT? Hopefully you know by now since you're both signed up, but the MCAT is the medical college admissions test that you have to take to go to any medical school in the United States, right? So this is a requirement. And it's something that is a big undertaking, but really gives medical schools a good sense of your knowledge base as you are applying. One of the things I wanted to share with you today, that if you would like additional information after today, the AAMC is actually hosting their own webinar on December 10th that you can register for. And so this QR code will take you there. You can register for that event and go and kind of hear from the organization that puts on the test itself, a little bit more information about what they want you to know for this particular testing year. So that is coming up. Okay, so for those of you that are taking it, you know that there are a variety of topics covered on the MCAT. It is a multiple choice examination, and it focuses on STEM as well as critical analysis and reasoning skills and social sciences. So all of the pre-med coursework that Cindy and I suggest that you take throughout your time at Wellesley is designed intentionally to help you prepare for the MCAT. So hopefully at this point you've taken most of your coursework for pre-med and you feel confident about a lot of these topic areas, because all of that has been prep along the way. We are going to spend just a couple minutes diving into one of the AAMC webinars on exam content. So this is just something that I think is helpful hearing from the folks that make the test, as far as what is covered and what you should prepare for. So I'm not sure if it'll take me to an external link.
Association of American Medical Colleges is pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on preparing for the MCAT exam. We are recording and we'll make the archive available
I'm going to just fast forward just a little bit.
The exam tests your knowledge of concepts and skills that medical school faculty.
I'll find the right spot for you. Here we go.
And what a final rehearsal of exam.
We need to hear all of it right now.
Finally, we'll talk about the fee assistance program and other resources. And then we'll end the hour with some Q&A. So while this session is focused on preparing for the MCAT, the first step in preparing is understanding the test. So we're going to start with a quick overview of the exam. The MCAT exam is a standardized multiple choice exam that's been part of the medical school admissions process for over 90 years, and it's used by all US and many Canadian medical schools. The exam tests your knowledge of concepts and skills that medical school faculty and physicians, as well as medical students and residents, identified as important to know when you start medical school. You likely already know that the MCAT assesses your knowledge of natural, behavioral, and social science concepts and principles, but it also assesses problem solving and critical thinking. This exam doesn't just test what you know, but how you apply your knowledge and solve problems. So as you prepare, please remember that your MCAT scores are just one piece of your overall application to medical school. So it's important. But it's just one piece of many that admissions committees use to evaluate your readiness for programs. So they're also looking at your transcripts, your work and volunteer experiences, your essays, letters of recommendation, and getting to know you through the interview process. So it's much more than just the MCAT exam. The exam includes 4 sections. Again, each question is multiple choice. There are 2 sections in the natural sciences. There's a section in the behavioral and social sciences, and there's the critical analysis and reasoning skills section, also known as CARS. The concepts tested in the science section of the exam are found in classes you've taken or are taking right now. These concepts are taught at most undergraduate institutions in introductory biology, physics, psychology, sociology, and first semester biochemistry, as well as general and organic chemistry. The undergrad course content will vary by institution, so your personal experience could be a little bit different, but overall, that's where the concepts are typically taught throughout the undergraduate programs. The critical analysis and reasoning skills section is very similar to other reading, comprehension, and reasoning tests that you may have taken throughout your academic career. It includes passages and questions that test your ability to comprehend and analyze what you read. The passages that you'll be presented with pulled from humanities and social science disciplines, emphasizing but not limited to philosophy, ethics, population health, and the studies of diverse cultures. This section requires no specific content or disciplinary knowledge. All the information you need to answer the question is provided in the passage and the questions themselves. So no specific knowledge is needed prior to that. Many of the resources that we're going to talk about today are available in the MCAT official prep hub. So I want to make sure that you know how to log in. So you can find the prep hub by going to aamc.org/MCAT prep. And it's going to be the first blue button on the upper right side of the screen. So if you look at the screenshots on the slide, the one over to the right, it has the blue button that says MCAT official prep hub. That's where you're going to click. In order to sign into the hub, you need your one AAMC ID. And this is a username and password that you're going to use to access many AAMC services. So you'll need it for registering for the MCAT exam, to purchase products, to submit your AMCAS application. So this is an ID you're going to need over and over again. So when you click on that button, you log in with your AAMC ID. This is where you're going to find all of the free resources for the MCAT prep. And if you end up purchasing any materials or get them through another program, that is also where you'll find all of your materials. So all of your prep materials will live in this one place.
Okay, so we're going to kind of stop there. So that I know that was a little foggy and I apologize, but so that is kind of the start of a webinar. So again, if you want to like attend a full webinar, do that December 10th one and it'll be similar. But I think just looking and kind of talking about content a little bit can be helpful coming from the folks that make the test itself. And we'll talk about that hub that she was talking about later, but that is an important piece of the process. So any questions so far from either of you? Nope. Okay. All right, so hopefully you can see the presentation again. Holler at me if you can't. So everything they kind of talked about hopefully broke down like what's on the MCAT. And so this is just kind of like exam overview day of and how much time is allotted to each of those sections and the number of questions. So as I mentioned before, it is a long test in terms of time and length. So one of the things that we really encourage you to do is to do full length tests, practice tests during your study period. And of course, those are important to practice questions, but they also are important to just have you practice yourself, your body, your mind in a seat, answering questions for that length of time. There's really not another scenario, in your life where you're going to be sitting at a testing seat for almost 8 hours, really working on these challenging questions. So that is something that we want you to practice. And we'll talk a little bit about how to kind of like infuse that into your schedule. That really should be something that you plan on doing. Just like the DAT, the AAMC has a guide for applicants, for folks that are taking the MCAT, and they update it every year. And this QR code here leads you to the guide that has a lot of really great information on the MCAT. The AAMC really tries to do a good job about being transparent about what to expect on test day and the content to expect. So just a little note here about cost and registration. I know that our 2 attendees today have already registered, but for those of you that haven't, a little information on fees. The one thing that's important to note is that if you do decide to change your test date, that's fine. That is actually relatively common, that someone kind of books a test date and then you get close to it and you think, well, I'm not actually ready for that test date. It's okay to move it. You just want to know that there's a fee associated with that test change or test cancellation. So an example of that is in this lower box here. If you have the fee assistance program, which is support in terms of funding for the MCAT, those fees are slightly different. So you can kind of look more towards the fee assistant information for that. But there are testing fees and then schedule change fees as well. But like I said, it's more important that you take the test when you're ready. So if you do need to change it, that's okay. Just be prepared to pay that fee as well. Okay. So you two have done this, but registration for the MCAT is a really interesting experience. Either one of you want to kind of chime in? Did you register right on October 2nd, or did you register a little bit later?
I registered on October 2nd.
And how was that? Did you have to go into the waiting room?
Yeah, I was actually like 18,000th in line. So I was like waiting with my screen open for like 2 hours, but it was fine. I got the date I wanted and the place I wanted, so it worked out.
Good, good. No, thank you for sharing. I think that's really important for people to know because I think that's a common experience that everyone, right, like across the country, maybe even other countries are registering for this exam on this opening day, and it can be really intimidating to get on and see like you're in this huge waiting room. But that is a common experience, and you just kind of have to put your like computer there in front of you and wait it out and do other things, do what you need to do. But that does happen. Did you have a similar experience, Emma, or did you register later?
Yeah, I registered on the same day. And it was about an hour wait for me, so not too bad. And I was able to get my top location and top date.
Right. Yeah. And so the other tip I would give folks is to have a backup location and date, right? So both of you were able to get your first choice, which is great, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And so if you're really solid on a date, you can pick a different location, whether you want to drive an hour somewhere else or maybe fly home and take it if your home is somewhere else. Or if you're flexible on your date, then you can pick a backup date as well. So registration is definitely important and obviously it fills up fast. Spots will open up as people change their dates, right? So you can stay updated on that, but a lot of people are going to be registering on that opening day. If you don't mind me keep making this conversation now, how did each of you decide when to take the MCAT? Like we both decided on different times, March and January. What helped make your decision around that?
So for me, I knew that I'm actually applying direct,
Mhm.
at least so far. So I knew that I didn't want to be dealing with taking the MCAT on top of like my junior spring class load and trying to apply.
Mhm.
Because it just felt like that would be really overwhelming. And I also had purposely made my fall semester a little bit lighter so I could study alongside my fall semester, have all of winter break to really just like lock in and
Mm.
then take it, hopefully be done with it, come back and kind of get to start the next semester fresh with that kind of behind me.
Great.
So,
You're taking January, right?
yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Awesome. Yep. Makes sense. Um,
Yeah, I can add as well. Um, I was originally going to take the exam in September, um, but I started working a full-time job and I graduated, so I started working a full-time job over the summer and found it difficult to commit the time that I wanted to. So I delayed until March.
mhm. Great. Yeah. And so you'll see that everybody has a different timeline and different reasoning. And I think it's really important to kind of reflect on what makes the most sense for you. Um, so the important note here is that the latest you really want to take it is April of your applying year, and that just allows you to um, get your score back in time to apply early when the application opens and for the schools to get your score at the same time that your application comes through. Med schools have rolling applications, but we encourage you to apply the day that the application opens, June 1. And so you want your MCAT score to align with that. And of course, you can take it more than once if you want, and we'll talk about that. But ideally, you don't want to sit through the 7.5 hour test more than once if you don't have to. Okay, so here's the scheduling for this year. Obviously, it's updated every year. You'll see there's an exam date listed here and the score release date. So it takes about a month to get your scores back. So for those of you that are already scheduled, you know when you're going to get your scores back. Another thing that's important to note is that if you take the MCAT more than once, again, that's fine. But at med schools, we'll see all of your MCAT scores. So they do get all of them. You can't take it again and erase the first one. So you do really want to wait until you're ready to take it. But there's a lot of available dates and weekends and weekdays to take it. And testing sites all over the country, like we said. So hopefully you'll be able to find a date that works for you. And then just a quick note about the fee assistance program. So the AAMC offers the fee assistance program to help assist those that need financial assistance in paying for the MCAT and the application process. It's a nice program, and you can certainly apply to see if you qualify. There's a nice webinar all about it, which I listed the link to below, but you can find lots of information about that or meet with Cindy and I to talk about fee assistance if you think you might apply for this and qualify for that program. Okay, so we talked a little bit about timing. So obviously everyone's making timing decisions based on kind of what's going on in their life and when they're trying to get everything done by. You do want to make sure you have adequate study time, so that should be definitely part of your decision. And so we heard from a couple of applicants, and they had considered, when they are going to be able to study and study the best and the most, and that's really important. So allowing yourself at least 3 to 6 months to study. Some of that depends on if you're doing full-time or part-time studying, but you want plenty of time to feel like you're not crunched to have to study for this really big test. So that should be part of your decision-making factor as well. A couple other things to note. Again, I said ideally take the MCAT once, but you can take it 3 times in a testing year, 4 times over 2 consecutive testing years, and you have 7 attempts overall in your lifetime. Just keeping in mind your schools get all of your results. Okay, so creating a study plan. So this is kind of the big part, and probably where some of our applicants are at today because they're already all registered. So once you have your testing date, creating a study plan is the next piece. Some people skip over the creating the study plan and just go right into it, but I think it's really important to sit down and take some time to think about how am I going to make this happen and how am I going to stick to this plan. So that's a really, really important piece. Obviously, all of us have lots going on in our lives, so you want to think about how can I work around either classes, coursework, or am I working? Am I in my gap time? How am I going to find time outside of work to get in everything I need to get in to study for the MCAT? So, again, AAMC has a great number of free resources on this. And so these are some tips that they give when starting to think about a study plan. They actually have this this guide to taking the MCAT. I don't know if anyone's seen that before, but it really breaks down everything. The other suggestions they give is to start with some Khan Academy videos because they're free content videos, and it's just a nice place to start to refresh yourself on the different topic areas that you've had coursework in but need refreshers on. And then using MCAT official sample tests to simulate day experience. So we talked about that already, is to take the full length test a couple of times. So this outlines kind of different ways that our applicants, our Wellesley students study. A lot of our applicants choose to self-study. And so I can ask you all in a moment what you've kind of thought about, but what I mean by self-study is collecting all of your study resources and creating a plan and doing the studying on your own, or maybe like with a peer. The other thing that folks do is they may choose to do a prep course. So recently I've talked to 2 students who are doing prep courses through Princeton Review. We do have a discount at Wellesley where you get half off of those test prep courses. They still are expensive, thinking in the thousands rather than the hundreds of dollars, but for some people, that's really worth it because they like having someone there who is giving them structured lessons, homework, keeping them kind of on track for their MCAT studying. So that is an option. So if you're a person who you start self-studying, but then you're like, wow, I'm really not holding myself to the standard I thought I could do because I'm busy and I've got a lot of other things going on, you can look into a prep course or a tutor. And your third option, the tutor, is getting someone one-on-one to help you with your studying. So at this point, have you, I know we had Sunny joined us as well, but have you elected to self-study, Emma and Kamaya?
Yeah, I'm self-studying with Blueprint.
Great. How's that going? Are you liking it?
I like it a lot. I feel like it took a lot of the logistical weight kind of off my shoulders of like having to make a plan and like
Mm-hmm.
having to find resources. Like I like that it's all there and I like being told what to do
Yes.
and just like knowing I have to do it myself. It's definitely a challenge trying to do it all together and feel like because obviously like you're not gonna get everything right 100% of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
like that mental block is definitely a struggle, but I do really like how it's going so far.
Mm-hmm. So is Blueprint, would you say that that's like a self-paced kind of like study course you're doing, or is it more like you purchase their resources and are made your own plan?
So they have a bunch of plans, but I chose the self-paced.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's really nice because you put in like what your schedule looks like and like your test date and everything, and then they make an entire plan with all the content for that day and
Awesome.
every day. Like, and they put in all the like practice exams and everything. So it's literally like you just have to log on and like do your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nice.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. That's awesome because that's one of the options that you all have is doing a self-paced course. And Blueprint certainly is one of the companies that do it. There's a bunch of companies, and sometimes folks will be like, is one better than the other? We have students and applicants do a big, long variety of Princeton Review, Kaplan, Blueprint, and everyone does fine. So I wouldn't say like any of them is better than the other. The AAMC will talk about their resources today. They're the ones that create the test, so it's nice to use them as well when you can. But they don't have the courses. But that's great. The other two folks I was thinking about that I was talking through Cat starting with recently. They both did the course, but they actually did the one that's like on like in person but over Zoom. What did I just say? So like a synchronous course. So you're actually meeting with someone virtually. So they felt like they needed that like touch point as well. So it's really interesting that there's so many different options, and I'm glad you could share that one with us. And then Emma, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was actually doing that what you were describing, the Blueprint Zoom course.
Oh,
So
Blueprint. All
similar
right.
to Kamia's, that I have the assignments all laid out for me on the calendar, but then it's the added Zoom courses twice a week.
Great. That's awesome. So you're both really like already very dedicated to like a study plan. It's so nice when someone makes a study plan for you, of course. So I'm glad that you were able to invest in that as well. So that's awesome. Um, and Sunny, if you have any questions, please let us know. I know you jumped on a little bit later. We're kind of talking through some of these things based on what you all are.
Yeah, I haven't started because I'm still a first year, but I just wanted to listen to like when I'm supposed to be taking the MCAT or
Mhm.
how when I should start studying and stuff like that because I have no idea like what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yes, well, hopefully you saw the slide that you don't need to take it yet. The latest you can take it is April of your applying year, but you also don't want to take it until you're done taking all your pre-med coursework. So that is a big deciding factor as well. So once you've gotten through like your prereq coursework, you can think about when to schedule and take your MCAT. Some of that depends on if you take gap time. So, some students take gap time between and some don't. So, a lot of it is dependent on that. As far as studying, did either of you start like kind of part-time, any kind of like maybe very low stakes studying early in your academic career? Or did you really wait until you were done with your pre-med coursework? Because I've heard people say sometimes that like they did studying along with their pre-med coursework. I don't know, any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I started studying after I graduated. I hadn't even learned about the MCAT requirements or not the requirements, rather the structure of the MCAT until after I graduated. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually am finishing up my requirements right now, which it ended up being kind of nice because it's like I learned stuff in class and then it'll like actually show up in my like MCAT prep, which is nice. And so it feels like it's easier to like learn the information and like review information as well. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, so you're kind of doing it together. Yeah. So two different perspectives there, but I think neither is right or wrong. It's really a matter of your own personal like schedule for medical school, and kind of what timeline you have and what ability you have to study and when that's going to fall for you. And sometimes you think it's going to go one way and then you take a change of plans, right? Actually, more than sometimes, right? That's more often that what happens. And that's okay too, right? There's always opportunities to change, pivot, and do what you need to do to get the best score possible. Okay, so hopefully, as part of your study plans, you have a nice mix of content review, test questions, and full-length tests. So that should definitely be part of any study program. So one of the mistakes people make sometimes is they'll just dive all into content and won't practice enough test questions. It's really important for your brain to go through the actual test question part of it, including those full lengths. So just making sure that that's part of your program. Usually what you'll do when you start your MCAT study plan, one of the very first things is to take a diagnostic. So what that means is just taking your very first full-length test to give you a starting point. So that may have been part of the Blueprint program or it may not have been. But taking that first full-length test is just an important piece of the puzzle. You don't have to think like, oh my gosh, I only got a 495 on this. I'm never going to be able to do well in the MCAT. Especially if you're not done with your pre-med coursework, like you're not going to get a great score on the diagnostic. But the idea there is to take a look at your score and if there are certain content areas that you are lacking where you need to put a lot more review into, or if it's overall you kind of scored okay, it's more for you that you need to practice test questions. So there is some good information to take away from taking a diagnostic. So if you haven't done that, making sure you take a full-length test. If you are thinking about your study plan, starting with a diagnostic makes a lot of sense. And even if you are doing another program like Blueprint, it's nice to know that the AAMC does offer some free tests. So on that prep hub that they talked about in that webinar in the very beginning, you can link to any of the free resources they have. And they do have 2 full-length practice. One's free graded and one's free non-graded. So you might at this point want to do the graded one, but it's nice to take advantage of that. And then it might give you a good like comparison of a Blueprint test versus a AAMC test as well. So definitely taking advantage of any free resources that they have. And then practice, practice, practice. So Emma, for Blueprint, how many full-length tests are they recommending, or have they not talked about that?
I think they're recommending. Actually, I'm not sure they even give a number. We have 9 available to us through Blueprint. And then through Blueprint, they also give us the 4 or 5 AAMC
Right.
exams. So they recommend like probably 5 to 8, I think.
Yep, that sounds in line with what we typically recommend. So that's awesome you have so many to choose from. Yeah, so some of that depends on like the amount of full-length tests you take depend on how long you have to study, right? So if you have a longer period of time, you're going to have more time to take full-length tests. But taking at least about 5, I think, is really important because again, that practice in the length of the test is something that you just have to do to help you prepare. So this is a little bit about the AAMC and kind of if you go through them, what they have to offer, which is test questions as well as full-length tests. We do have discounts through career education for the AAMC prep bundle as well as UWorld test questions, which our students find really helpful. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from UWorld test questions. And so it's a lot cheaper if you buy those directly through us. And later on, I think I have a QR code that takes you there as well. Okay, any questions about that? So Sunny asked if Blueprint's free. It is not free, right? And Emma, you don't have to tell us how much it is, but most of the time if you purchase, there's different places you can purchase test prep materials from, and they all cost different amounts, so you kind of have to research and look into it. Nobody gives you like a full test prep course or plan for free. AAMC offers the most free resources, but it still forces you to do a lot of the legwork. So I'll show you some of the stuff they have, but on that prep hub. But most of the study plans and programs are at cost. If you have the fee assistance, so one of the things we talked about earlier was the AAMC offers the fee assistance program. If you qualify and get fee assistance, you get their whole test prep bundle for free, and that's like a couple $100 value. So that's really great. So you may be able to get that, but probably not a course itself. Okay. So just to reiterate what a study plan should have in it, if you're creating it yourself, making sure you have a full-length diagnostic, content review, 5+ full-length practice tests, and then test questions as well. And going back and forth between questions and content is a really efficient way to work, focusing on content at some points and spending some days focusing on test questions. It also just challenges you in different ways at different times, so that you're not getting burnt out of studying. So the AAMC, this is right from that prep hub that they led you to. They give lots of sample schedules, as well as like they'll provide you with a blank schedule like this that you can build it yourself if you don't have access to something that Blueprints or another organization is creating for you. So this is a schedule someone came up with on their own. So you can see it goes Sunday to Saturday, kind of talks about their schedule and what they're doing. And remember, everyone's going to be at a different point in their life when they're taking this. So yours is going to look very different. Areas of study, and then the resources and strategies they're going to use to study. So study these contents, make flashcards, create summaries, and then the practice is flashcards and practice test questions. So it kind of goes from there on what they're going to be doing every single day. And when you initially start studying for the MCAT, before you start, you should have created a study plan for the entire time you have leading up to the MCAT. So you know what you're doing every day, every week leading up to the MCAT, and that will help you stay on track. That's where some people, I think, get lost a little bit, is if they don't have a plan and then they just try to kind of go into it thinking, I'm going to just do a little studying every day and see how it goes. And then you really kind of lose track of where you're at or what you should be doing, or losing motivation as well. So this is free and low cost resources you can use to help you study. So I always say use the free stuff first and then move on to the stuff you have to pay for. Again, if you get fee assistance, you're going to get a lot more for free. But Khan Academy videos are free, as well as a lot of the AAMC resources. Emma, have you found any other free resources that you like that you want to share?
I'm using, I don't know if you mentioned this already, Anki decks, they're flashcards.
Oh, I haven't mentioned that.
Yeah, those have been really good just for like strict content review, and memorization. Again, you need to apply the content for the exam, but this is good to build fundamentals.
Yep. I think I talked about those later on, but yeah, that's, I think, an important resource as well. So this QR code takes you to Wellesley's discounted resources. Oops, look what I did. I went the wrong way. So we do have some options for students. So if you have friends that are like putting together their resources now, we do have Princeton Review. They offer test prep courses and materials. Wellesley has a 40% discount there. And then we have bundle discounts and UWorld discounts. We also have, if you're taking the DAT for dental school, we have a discount on the DAT boot camp course. So we try to get like a wide variety of discounts for students, but again, we know it's expensive. The other thing you can apply for is Career Education has mini grants for students going into graduate programs. And usually it's around $100, $50 to $100. It's not a lot of money, but you can use it for anything. So you can reimburse yourself for your Blueprint fees, a little bit of money, or use it otherwise. But that's another just little piece that may help in the long run in terms of paying for all this. We also do have books. So we have a book library here in Career Education where we have MCAT prep books. And we have tons of them, and you can check them out and use those if you're studying content, if you're around, of course. If you're on your gap time far, far away, you may not be able to do that. Okay, and then these tips are from a student who went to Wellesley's and started a blog, and did well on the MCAT, and obviously got into medical school. And so I think that resource you were talking about, Emma, oh yeah, right here. hindsight 2020, she didn't use the flashcards and she wishes she did. So those flashcards are mentioned there. As well as some other, I think, really nice tips. Focus on the practice tests. Take as many as you can. That's a good tip. Have you taken many practice tests, Emma?
Yeah, I've probably taken about 6 so far.
It's a lot, but it's worth it. That's great. And then another like tip obviously is prioritize self-care. So one of the things that can happen like when you're MCAT studying is you can get burnt out of studying, right? So if you find yourself, 6 days into your study plan and you're really feeling burnt out, it's okay to take a break, right? And give yourself a day and kind of push things back if you need to. When you're burnt out and your brain kind of can't take much more, it's not going to be productive to move forward anyway. So you have to allow yourself some balance. I know that's a lot to hear when you're like, well, I have to squeeze in this much in this amount of time. But again, it won't be productive. You will find that you're not able to register and remember information if you're pushing yourself too hard. So you want to try to figure out a way to balance everything. And some of that is about timing. Like, when am I taking the MCAT? Am I giving myself enough time to do all this? And some of that is about just building that self-care, whatever fills you up in a way that makes you feel better, a walk, a meditation, a cup of coffee, tea, whatever that is for you, building that into your study schedule as well. So having a day or a time where you're able to step back from the studying and take care of yourself, that makes a big difference. And that's something sometimes we put to the side and don't think about, but that should be a part of your program. And then there are a lot of resources out there as well. One of the things I would tell you to do is to try to stay off Reddit, because I think there's a lot of misinformation on there. Same thing with like just kind of the random Instagram influencers and TikTok influencers. You know, the thing that you have to remember is, or think about when you're watching videos online, is what's their intent, right? So it's likely that they're trying to promote or sell something to you, right? So most people don't do it just for the heck of it. They usually have a little bit of intent behind it, which is fine, but you just need to know that going into those. And the thing is, I think our students and alums tend to get really stressed when they compare themselves to others. And often the folks that are online doing the content are folks that are really successful in the process. Maybe the top 5% of people. And so sometimes that can be a negative experience for you because you might be like, well, I'm not like I didn't score a perfect score on the MCAT and this person did, and I'm comparing myself. And that's really just a negative place to go. You have to be mindful that like the people on the internet are not necessarily representative of the majority or the average student or applicant. So just be cautious. One of the ones I really like is actually from Blueprint, and they do a really nice podcast. I don't know if you've listened to this yet about study plans. They have tons of them. This one in particular is a 4 to 6 month study plan. But they have quite a large variety that you can listen to, and they also constantly bring in med students to talk about this as well. And I think they provide a really balanced approach as well as like a mindful approach to studying. So if you are going to link onto watching something, maybe checking out these videos before others. And then just some frequently asked questions. And I'll just pause here for a minute to see if either of you have questions that are kind of coming up for you or that we haven't addressed yet in this conversation.
I kind of wanted to know like how heavily the MCAT is like considered in your medical school application because sometimes I hear people say that like your GPA and MCAT is primarily what matters, but at the same time I also hear like it's holistic, so I don't know what's actually true.
You probably have heard both of those. So yeah, so I guess it is kind of both, which is interesting. I'll try to decipher that for you a little bit. So it is a holistic application process in the way that they will look at everything on your application that you're preparing. And it's an intense test and it's an intense application. So they're going to look at all your personal statements, really important, how you write about your activities, the application itself, your interviews, of course, and secondaries when those come, and then your transcripts and MCAT scores. Some of the schools also will look at your distance traveled, how hard it was for you to get to this point compared to somebody else, which they'll learn from the essays that you're writing. So there are a lot of factors, and I can tell you from like going to a couple conferences and hearing from a couple admissions deans that it is really true that they do look at that. That being said, they will check your numbers to make sure that they know that you can be successful in a medical program, right? So what the MCAT score does, and they have research to back it up, is that it shows that you're going to be successful on your later medical school exams. And so if you don't or aren't able to get like a score on the MCAT that particular school's looking for, they may feel like that you're not able to be successful in their program, and so they won't consider you as an applicant, right? So there is like definitely some truth to the idea that if you apply with really like lower GPA and a lower MCAT score, that you may not even be brought to the table for the rest of the holistic process, because they just feel like academically you wouldn't be able to survive in that program. And medical school is so competitive that they have enough applicants that will reach those scores that they can pull from. So you do have to have certain numbers, certainly. And one of the things that Cindy and I are here for is when you go to apply to medical school, we look at your transcripts and your grades, and then we look at your MCAT score, and we try to give you the best advice in terms of if it makes sense for you to move forward in the process, right? So we kind of have like that idea that if you have about a 3.5 or higher, and all other things are looking good GPA wise, then moving forward probably makes sense. But if you're lower than that, it probably makes more sense for you to take some post-bac classes and improve your GPA, or you may not even be looked at by those medical schools. So it's kind of both, and that's what makes it a hard answer, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight on kind of what's important and why. Because they really like in a lot of medical schools, which is nice, are on that pass-fail system. So once you're in medical school, I guess I can say is most of those people are successful and become doctors, the majority, but they have to make sure that you're going to be that kind of person. And they use test scores and GPA to make sure that they're letting in people that are then going to become doctors and not drop out or fail out of medical school. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I also kind of wanted to like follow up and ask like, for MCAT, like for example, if you have 1 point off the MCAT, does that also mean like one question wrong? Like I don't know like the grading scale. So like if I get like 1 point off the MCAT, does that mean like one question was wrong? And also for GPA, like I never did it on a 4.0 scale, so I don't know what that translates to out of 100. I don't know if that question made sense, but
Yeah. No, it did. It's just not a super easy question to answer. So if you look down at this last question here about how the MCAT scored, it gives you kind of a range, but no, it's not like a ratio of 1-to-1. It's more percentages on each of the questions. It is like each section is a quarter of your final score, but question wise, it's not broken down by like 1-to-1. You can actually look up more though. There's a guide earlier in the presentation, which I think you came a little later, so you probably don't have the link to the presentation, but I can put that in the chat so that you can kind of go back and look through the AAMC guide. Same with GPA, it's not a perfect science. If you we can definitely talk about that later too, Sunny, but you don't need all A's to get the GPA you need for medical school, certainly. I think you could probably get quite a number of B's and still hover above that 3.5. But again, it's not perfect, so we'd have to look at your grades specifically. But don't worry about the scoring as a first year. How about that? I think as a first year, one of the things I always try to say is like if you can create a strong foundation for a GPA next semester, just focus on that, and that's just your first step. Like starting with a nice strong GPA because you weren't graded this semester. So next semester, just start off strong and kind of take it from there semester by semester, but don't feel like you have to get all A's in order to be successful. Okay. So Emma, if you have any questions, please feel free to um, jump on. So this is just
Sure.
some
I'm
data.
good right now. Thank you.
This is just some data. So you probably have heard of some of the numbers floating around out there. So the national average for an MCAT admitted student to medical school is about a 511. So that's an admitted student. So right, so people apply with lower scores, and that's an average. So some higher, some lower. This is the Wellesley stats for 2023. So Wellesley students do tend to have a little bit higher average of an MCAT score and do really well in the medical school application process in general. If you want specific data, there's on like what schools have taken what students with what GPA and what MCAT score. There is the MSAR. Have either of you heard of the MSAR before?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you haven't, Sunny, you have to subscribe to it. I think it's just $25 maybe for a student. But basically it breaks data down medical school by medical school. So you can actually see like, okay, at Tufts, how many or what percent of students had like the 511, 504, so it gives you like more structured and in-depth data on MCAT scores. And it's interesting, right? Because we go off the averages and you can Google the averages, but really when you get into the data, you see that people are accepted at a much lower, MCAT and also at a much higher MCAT as well. So that MSAR is another resource that the AAMC has. So you can Google it and look into that if you're interested in more data. But yeah, so the scoring is weird, but that's kind of what you're shooting for there. So any additional questions, thoughts? I can